Okay. I see that most of the people have already joined, so I think we can start. Welcome everyone to a webinar. You need to implement AI now. But what even is AI? I saw that quite a couple of you have registered for this webinar, but to be honest, I suppose I shouldn't be too surprised because, well, AI is kind of the hottest topic of 2023. I always like to start my presentations by sort of explaining how did we come up with this topic? Where did this topic come from? And for this one, it was around half a year ago at the beginning of summer when we were thinking, what kind of topics could we do for directions? Because this topic was first presented at directions, and of course, one of ideas was let's do something on AI. And I was thinking, okay, but what? So I started kind of exploring what is AI, and the more I was Googling, the more I was researching the topic, the more I came across articles like this, where it says AI is a strategic tool for shaping the trajectory of businesses in an ever-evolving marketplace. Or if we skip to the last sentence, AI offers a powerful suite of capabilities that can set the stage for sustainable growth, innovation, and long-term success. Now, this is a lot of marketing text that by the end of it, I still didn't quite understand what am I to do with AI. This is a text from Microsoft's one-pager, which ended up being 12 pages long, on how business users should understand AI. So I knew that I won't get much of an answer from the marketing text. So instead, I turned into the news to see what's new, what's happening right now. And there was also an overflow there because I just found a bunch of news saying OpenAI released this model, and Microsoft has released a Copilot here, a Copilot there, a Copilot there. And then there's also Google who wants to play the same game with Bard or just recently with Gemini Ultra. And at that point, I was thinking, what if we do a session on this? What if instead of talking about how do you implement AI and how do you create new features with AI, what if we do a step back and talk about what even is AI? But before we go further with the content, I'd first like to take a minute to introduce myself. My name is Tine Staric, and I'm a software developer here at Companion. I'm originally from Slovenia, though for the past couple of years, I've been living in Lithuania in what you could call a career adventure of sorts. I like to introduce myself as really passionate about three things right now. I'm really passionate about technology, Business Central, and everything around Business Central. I'm really passionate about making bread. I love making sourdough. I love making baguettes. I love making buns. I love creating things with flour. And I'm also really passionate about making beer. Back home in Slovenia, I actually had my own beer brewery, and that's definitely a hobby that I want to pick up once I do relocate back. And maybe in a couple of years, I'll be able to do some sort of a webinar based on that. But anyway, those are the things that I am. But what am I not? I'm not a data scientist, and I'm not someone who has spent the last couple of decades working with AI daily. But I assume neither are you. And that's exactly how I wanted to structure this presentation today. I wanted to do a presentation on AI for people like us who haven't worked with AI for the past 10 years. So on that topic, what are we going to hear about today? First, we're going to talk about a business case where we at Companion, we have worked with a couple of partners, and we have actually implemented AI with some of their Business Central features. Now, throughout that, we have learned a couple of things, but we also made some mistakes, and I want to share those with you. One of the most obvious ones was that we were trying to throw all of the possible opportunities where we could use AI into a large language model. But of course, AI is not just large language models. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to break down AI. to explain that there's more to AI than just ChatGPT. Next, we're going to talk about different types of AI usage. We're going to talk about how you can train your own models, or on the other side of the spectrum, how you can use a pre-trained model. Then, of course, right now, generative AI is the hottest part of AI, so we're going to do some sort of a deep dive there. And finally, I'll try to pass on a couple of suggestions, and then we're going to wrap everything up. So let's start with the business case, with the project where we've actually implemented AI. The business case is not exactly like the one that I'm going to present right now, partially because I modified it a bit to make it easier to present to you, and also this one was easier to animate in PowerPoint. So imagine that I am a hotel owner, and my hotel has 4 different floors, each one more expensive and each one more luxurious. So it's in my best interest to try to find customers which I can upgrade to a more expensive floor. And to achieve that, I have people who are analyzing bookings, they're analyzing the occupancy, and they're trying to find which people can we upgrade to a more expensive floor. And once we identify such an upgrade opportunity, an employee creates a personalized email saying, "Dear customer, we're really excited to be hosting you in a couple of weeks. But we're actually running a promotional campaign where we can offer you an even better room with a better TV, a better bed, a better view, and we can even throw in a little bit of a discount." And if we're lucky, the customer accepts that offer and we can upgrade them to a more expensive floor. Now, within this business case, we've identified 2 areas where we could use AI. The first one was for generation of these personalized emails, which worked pretty well with a large language model. The results were quite satisfactory. And the second opportunity was figuring out upgrade opportunities so that we could throw all of our bookings into AI, and AI would say, send an email to this person, to this person, and to this person. But that's where things didn't go so well, really, because, well, AI started to struggle quite a lot when we were dealing with dates and overlapping dates and how do we calculate the periods between 2 dates, because a language model is more suited for language things. So one of the mistakes that we did is we made the assumption that, well, AI is a language model, or AI is ChatGPT, which is quite a common assumption these days. And I mean, that's not wrong. ChatGPT is AI, but AI is so much more than that. AI has been around for quite a couple of years now, and we have many different models. We have models that can understand pictures or image recognition. We have models that can help us make predictions. We have models that recognize speech. We can have models that can help with decisions. And of course, in the end, we also have models like large language models that are good at dealing with text. Let's try to illustrate that a bit more by showing a couple of examples. How do these different models work? For a language model, you give it some sort of a text, a prompt, like, "Can you make me a super enthusiastic greeting?" And the language model will generate text for you saying, "Hello and welcome, my awesome friend." It will add all the emojis, all the exclamation marks, because language generation is what a language model is good at. We also have image generation models where you give it some text, like, "Can you generate a picture of a conference speaker on the topic of AI in a room full of people?" And the image generation model then creates a completely new picture out of that for you. We have prediction models. You can think of prediction models as you feed them a bunch of your historical data, like your historical data on sales. And based on that, if you ask the prediction model, "What are my sales going to be on the 1st of January 2024? It's going to give you its best educated guess on, well, what the sales could be based on your historical movements. We have then image recognition models. These models, if you show it, for example, a picture of a dog, the image recognition model knows, well, that's a dog. And if you show it a picture of a muffin, it will recognize, oh, okay, that's a muffin. We have speech recognition models where you send in a recording of your voice and it's going to transcribe that for you and output a text. Now, we already see that AI is more than just large language models. But at the same time, we also have to keep in mind that to create these AI experiences, quite often multiple models are connected together. For example, I have a really simplified case over here where if I would like to speak into my phone to say, can you generate me a picture of a speaker on a conference? And that in the end, a picture would present itself on my phone, we can see that there's already three models involved here. First, my recording would go to a speech recognition model that would transcribe it into a text. That text can be passed into a language model to create a more optimized prompt for the image generation model, which will in the end create the image. So this is really a simple case, but you can already see that one, AI is quite much more than language models, and it's usually connecting many different models together to create the full experience. Now that we sort of understand that there's more to AI, let's talk about how do we actually use those models. And I'm going to oversimplify things here and say that there's three types of usage that we can go for. We can either train our own models, we can find the models that somebody else has trained, and we can fine-tune them for our specific use cases. And don't worry, I'll explain training and fine-tuning in a second over here. Or the third option is we can simply use a pre-trained model that somebody else has trained, and we use it for our use cases. So before we answer this, what should we use? Let's first talk about what does it mean to train a model and what does it mean to fine-tune a model. For training a model, it's pretty similar to how you would teach a child to recognize pictures. Let's take an image recognition model, for example. If you would like to teach your child to recognize what's a picture of a dog, you would show a picture of a dog to a child and say, this is a dog. And we do the same thing with a model. We collect a bunch of pictures of dogs and we feed them into the model saying, this is a dog, and this is a dog, and this is a dog. And next, we're going to collect a bunch of pictures of muffins and we're going to feed those into the image recognition model, saying this is a muffin, this is a muffin, and this is a muffin. And from there, the model will already make its own sort of understanding that if it sees ears, then there's a high chance that this is a picture of a dog. If it sees blueberries, then there's a high chance that this is a muffin. And next time you show it a picture of a muffin, the model will already know, oh, yeah, that's a muffin. And when you show it a picture of a dog, the model will know, okay, that's a dog. Now, I will say this quite often throughout the presentation, but we have to understand that training a model requires a lot of data. It requires thousands and thousands of data points. So sometimes to make things a bit easier, instead of training a model from scratch, we can find a model that somebody else has trained, and we can fine-tune it for our specific use case. So let's illustrate that. Let's say that we have the same image recognition model that understands what are dogs and what are muffins. If we show a picture of a chocolate muffin to this model and a picture of a blueberry muffin, it will say both of these are muffins, which is correct. But let's say our use case is that we would also like to differentiate between the chocolate muffins and the blueberry muffins. Again, what we do is we take this existing pre-trained model, we get a bunch of pictures of chocolate muffins and we feed them into the model, saying that's a chocolate muffin, and we feed all the pictures of blueberry muffins, saying that's a blueberry muffin. And the next time we present the model with a chocolate muffin, it will not only know, oh yeah, that's a muffin, it will also know that's a chocolate muffin. Okay. So now we can get back to our question, what should we do? Should we train our own models? Should we fine-tune them? Or should we simply use whatever somebody else has trained? Now, I have tried to talk to a couple of consultants, a couple of developers, some data scientists, trying to get to the root of this question, what should Dynamics partners do? Because, of course, it's a slightly different industry because we are in the SMB space. And unfortunately, most of their answers were quite unsatisfactory. Everybody simply said, it depends. And they're right, it does depend. But I don't want to leave you with such an unsatisfying answer. So instead, I'll try to give you a couple of considerations when you should opt for training a model and when maybe you shouldn't. We have to understand that training and fine-tuning, it requires dedicated teams, it requires teams of data scientists, and it requires huge amounts of data. It also requires that you have a clear understanding of what's the problem that you're trying to solve, and that you have a strategy of how you're going to solve that problem. With these 2 bullet points in mind, you can already kind of see that training and fine-tuning models is mainly suitable for either enterprise customers, something like retailers. Retailers are a good example of somebody who has millions and millions of data points that you can use for training or fine-tuning. Or on the other hand, if you have vertical solutions where you have thousands of different customers and all of their data is kind of flowing through you, and you can use that data to train the models. Of course, then there's a question, can you use the data of those customers? But that's a question I don't really want to open right now. But I also want to talk about, what about if you don't have enterprise customers? What if you don't have vertical solutions? Well, then I'd argue just go for the pre-trained models. And the next question would be, well, where do I find those pre-trained models? I'm going to split that into 2 parts. One, if you're looking for more traditional models, something like image recognition, object detection, you can look into a service from Microsoft called AI Builder. AI Builder is a service that you can use with Power Apps, Power Automate, or with your own custom code, your own custom applications. You can see here a couple of templates of what they offer, some form processing templates, some entry extraction. However, I don't want to endorse AI Builder too much because in the past 3 years or so, every time that I started looking into AI Builder and could it be a good use case for us, I came to the same conclusion that it's a bit too expensive for the problems that we were trying to solve. So for the more traditional pre-built AI models, do keep in mind that there is AI Builder. But if you're more interested in the, let's call it new technology, the generative AI, the large language models, the best place to go for it is Azure OpenAI right now. In Azure OpenAI, you can find many different models, from language models to image generation to speech recognition. And in this next part of the presentation, I'll mainly focus on the language models. You can already see some information about language models on the slide, but I want you to focus on 2 things in here. One is that language models don't really understand the questions that we're giving them. They're only making predictions of what's the next most appropriate word that I would like to see. And I'll illustrate this point a little bit later, but just keep in mind that the language models don't understand the questions. They don't understand what they don't understand. They're just predicting what sounds good to a human reader. And the second point is that using a model does not make it smarter, which is a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. It's a bad thing because if today I ask a question to the language model and it gives me an unsatisfactory answer, then in 5 years from now, if I ask the same question to the model, I will get the same unsatisfactory answer. However, it's also a good thing, because if today I ask a language model, can you summarize this financial report for me, which I might consider sensitive data, I can be sure that the next person asking some questions around financial data won't get any of my financial report data into their response. However, keep in mind that that only applies to Azure OpenAI and to the features you might build on your own. If you're using ChatGPT and asking questions to ChatGPT, those questions do go to OpenAI, where they evaluate them, how good was the response based on the question. So kind of the key takeaway here is that when all of the new AI tools drop in the future, do take a minute to read the terms and conditions so you understand, are they collecting your data as input or are they not? Now let's talk a little bit more about language models. And the next time you have an opportunity where you could use one, I want you to have this slide in front of your eyes. What are they good at and what are they bad at? We can see that they're good at text generation, text summarization, translation, sentiment analysis, question answering. And we can already kind of see that our personalized email generation opportunity from the very beginning falls quite nicely in this in this left part of the slide. On the other side, if we look at what they're bad at common sense, they're bad at domain expertise, they're bad at complex scientific reasoning. And this third bullet point is why our occupancy analysis didn't work quite so well, because the language model doesn't really understand dates and doesn't really know how to calculate the periods between dates or when are the dates overlapping. It's simply predicting what's the most satisfying answer I would like to hear, and that's not what we were trying to achieve. But let's say you already have an opportunity which you've identified is good for a language model. What's next? Well, we won't be exactly talking about how do you then implement this new feature with AI, because that's not really the topic of this webinar today. I would like to say that if you're interested in how to implement features with AI in Business Central, there's going to be a really cool webinar in the first half of January on Areopa webinars. So do look out for Areopa webinars, where Dimitri will explain more about how do we actually implement features in Business Central with AI. For us today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about a couple of concepts that you can always kind of find in the LinkedIn posts when it comes to AI. We're going to talk about prompt engineering, we're going to talk about grounding, and we're going to talk about hallucinations. Let's start with prompt engineering. To understand prompt engineering, we first have to understand that when we ask a question to the language model, that question is what's referred to as a prompt. And what the language model gives back to us, that's what is referred to as a completion. And well, prompt engineering is supposed to be the new job title that everybody's going to have moving forward, that there's no longer going to be any developers, just prompt engineers, which I don't really agree with, but let's see how it all pans out. So prompt engineering is essentially finding the best prompt that will give you the most satisfying completion for your needs. And in our case, with the hotel, we started with a simple prompt like this. Can you generate an email I can send to a customer to upgrade them to a more expensive room in my hotel? And the language model completed that request with an email over here. And then we were thinking, okay, this is good, but this is maybe a bit too long. Let's try something shorter. So we adjusted the prompt to say, can you generate a short email I can send to a customer? And the completion changed. Now the language model kept everything a bit more concise. And this was already better, but from the developer's perspective, this was still a bit difficult because it was hard to parse this in code into what's the subject of the email, what's the message of the email, and what's the signature. So we modified the prompt a bit again, and we said, can you generate a short email, and can you return it in JSON format? Again, the completion changed, and now we got a more structured response, which was much easier to then parse out and include in our solutions. And that's essentially what prompt engineering is: finding the best prompt for the completion that is satisfying to you. It does look like it's mainly about moving the words around, but it's not only about that. There's also a couple of different parameters that you can specify when you're sending a request to the language model. I won't go through all of them, but one of the most common ones is temperature. Temperature is a parameter which holds the value from 0 to 2. It's a spectrum, and you specify how much of the temperature how hot do you want the language model to be. And you can think of it as how creative should the language model be when it's completing my prompt. So let's say we have a simple prompt like dog is A, and we want the language model to complete that. If we set the temperature to 0, we're going to get a far more repetitive response, more factual. And this is an example of a response with temperature set to 0. Dog is a domesticated mammal known for its loyalty to humans. We could ask this question multiple times, and most likely, quite often, we would get the same response. However, if we set the temperature to 1, which is going to make the model more creative, we give it the same prompt, it's going to give a more creative response. Dog is a mischievous, floppy-eared companion, always ready for an adventure. And you can already kind of tell that this is more creative, it's using more warm words, and if we would ask the same prompt multiple times to the model, we would expect that we would get a different response each time. So you can then find wherever on the spectrum from 0 to 2 you would like to be for your own prompts. Now let's move on to grounding. To understand grounding, we have to remember that language models were trained on billions and billions of data points from the World Wide Web. So when I ask it, can you create a short email so I can upgrade my customers in my hotel to a better room, the model will start to look for what does it know about customers, what does it know about hotels, what does it know about emails, what does it know about upgrades, and it will generate an email based on that. But that's going to be quite a generic response for us. And if you would like to make that response more personalized, this is where we use grounding. We add additional context so that the model can create a better response. So in our case with the hotel, instead of just asking for a short email, we also specified some properties, like their previous room had 2 single beds, a bathtub, and no kitchen. The upgraded room has a queen bed, a TV, a shower, and a fully equipped kitchen. And now, when the model creates an email, it's going to include those properties, and it's going to make the email more personalized. We could also include some details about the customer, and hence making it even more personalized. You can already see that here it included luxurious queen-sized bed, a fully equipped kitchen. And grounding is also a core component of the new Microsoft Copilots, which are being released everywhere. Because imagine if I would ask a question to this Copilot, which is supposed to be my new assistant, hey, do you know anything about this Contoso limited customer I'm meeting in 2 hours? If there was no grounding involved, the language model would simply give me a list of facts about Contoso Limited as a company, because that's what it was trained on from the World Wide Web. But instead, before the prompt reaches the language model, it will go through my inbox, through all the emails I've sent to Contoso, through all of my Teams recordings, meetings, chats, and it will ground that prompt in my own information so that when I get the completion back, it will be much more useful to me, because it will say, yeah, you had a meeting with them 2 weeks ago and you offered them this service, so you can continue on this conversation in 2 hours. Okay. Next, let's talk about hallucinations. We talk about hallucinations whenever a language model gives us something that doesn't really exist, something that it wasn't trained on. And I would actually argue that even though hallucinations are sometimes a bad thing, they are a core feature of a language model, because we don't want the language model to just give us the same text it was trained on. We want it to be creative, but the side effect is that it might sometimes produce things that aren't real. And that's when we have to keep a closer eye on what do we actually get back from the language model. I've included an example of hallucinations on this slide. You can maybe already spot it, but it's the air conditioning here. You can see that I haven't specified anything about air conditioning in the previous room or the properties of the upgraded room, and the language model has still included it in the set of properties in an email. Now, to be completely honest, I have included this bullet point on my own because I wanted to emphasize how hallucinations can look like. But on the other hand, we have experienced hallucinations during our project where we've actually implemented AI. And how do we prevent hallucinations? I don't think we can fully prevent them, but how we can make them occur less frequently is by grounding your prompts and more information that gives the language model less and less room to make something up. And also with prompt engineering, when we say, please don't use anything besides what is specified to you in a prompt. But in any case, the best approach to taking care of hallucinations is that at the end of the day, you still have a person look through what the AI has created. In our case with the hotel, there still is that same employee that goes through the emails and just checks if nothing wrong has been created. I have a couple more examples of hallucinations. A couple of months ago, when I was looking into what hallucinations are, why do the language models hallucinate, how do we prevent that, I came across a blog post where people have made ChatGPT hallucinate about a number of different things. One of the interesting ones was where they made ChatGPT reply with, Albert Einstein once said, the secret to creativity is knowing how to hide your flying unicorn. Now, since then, I have tried to get ChatGPT to hallucinate and give me the same response, but I couldn't get it to do that. It always said, sorry, I have no recollection of Albert Einstein saying that. The reason for this is because OpenAI knows that hallucinations are not good, so they're trying to actively work against that. However, I have been able to get ChatGPT to hallucinate. What I had to do was I had to ask it a question in Slovenian. So when I asked it this, who wrote a story about a bear named Tine? And to be clear, there are no stories about a bear named Tine. It happily replied. Let me translate this for you. It said, the story about the teddy bear Tine was written by a Slovenian writer. Teddy bear is one of the famous characters in Slovenian children's literature, and stories about him are popular among children in Slovenia. Yeah, I wish. I also tried the same prompt with who wrote a story about a turtle named Anna. Same response. Suddenly, the turtle Anna was one of the famous characters, and stories about her are popular among children. This is all just to kind of emphasize that language models do hallucinate, and we should never trust them fully. One small additional point that I have is logic and math don't mix well with a language model. Of course, if you ask it a simple question like, what is 5 plus 7? It will say 5 plus 7 equals 12. But when you step it up to slightly more difficult equations, which are still not too difficult, this only has multiplication, division, and some summation going on. It gives a full response, which makes us think like, okay, it knows what it's doing. First you do this, then you do this, next you do this. But even here, it already made a mistake. It said that we should divide 50 by 3. And if we look at the original formula, you should multiply 50 by 3. And not even that, you should divide 5 by 50 and multiply the result of that by 3. So just keep in mind, it's only predicting what the words we would like to hear. It doesn't really do any calculations so that it would know what's the correct answer in the end. And now this next slide is just a reminder for me that I want us to now switch out of the PowerPoint and try some hands-on prompts so I can illustrate to you even better that language models are simply predicting words, nothing more. Let's make this a bit bigger for you. This is a playground, which means it's like opening up ChatGPT's hood and looking what's happening underneath it. This is like the, let's say, the developer's access to ChatGPT, something along those lines. I wanted to show you what's happening in the playground because immediately you can notice that there's far more parameters that I can play around here with instead of just asking some prompts, changing the words around. Let me just enable this one. You can also see that I can specify many different models here because, well, not everything is just GPT. And you already know about GPT-3, GPT-4. So let's start with this one and let's give it a simple prompt like, today is a good day. Let's go to A. If I would ask any one of you to complete this prompt, I would get many different responses. Let's go to a beach, let's go to a museum, let's go to a coffee shop, let's go to, I don't know, a party. And all of these are correct answers. So the same thing kind of applies when the language model tries to complete this. You'll see that let's ask it to complete this prompt. I'll submit, and you'll see that, okay, the model decided, let's go to a park. This might be a good response for somebody asking, where should we go to? But when I click on the park, you'll notice that it had many different options to go for. It could either go for a park, for a new, for a party, for a cafe. And that's, like I said, that's exactly what the language model is doing. It knows many different possibilities how to end a sentence. And then based on other parameters, based on how freedom do we give to the model, it's going to complete it using one of these. You'll see that, for example, if I remove this completion, and we give some more context to the model, something like, I just bought a new swimsuit. And we ask it to complete the sentence again. Well, that's not what I expected. You can see here that the expected answer would be beach or pool or water. But since we do allow the model to be a bit more free, it can make its own decision. It still said, let's go to a park. And the creativity is controlled with temperature. You'll notice that right now at temperature 1, there are some green words over here, which are the most reliable answer. And there are also some red words, which are not so reliable as some others would be. If I remove this completion, and let's say we try to do this same thing again, but this time with the temperature set to 0, and we submit this prompt, we'll see that, for one, we have no red words here. Every word that is taken is the most probable word. And the same goes to the beach here. We're no longer talking about going to a park, because beach makes the most sense. And since the temperature is set to 0, we aren't going to risk it and trying some other words that maybe make sense as well. So that's one side of the temperature spectrum. I want to also show you what happens when you give too much freedom to a model and you say, well, you know what? Do whatever you want to do. I'm going to set it now to 2. Let's try to complete this same prompt again. And what you'll see is too much freedom to a model makes it go insane. It doesn't even start with a correct suggestion. It's just talking about, well, I don't even know what's it. I'm trying to find any sort of words that would make sense. Well, mostly nothing. And that's because, well, too much freedom, it makes all the decisions that it normally never would have made. And this is all just to illustrate 2 things. All the language models are doing are predicting the next word. And the second thing is the temperature is a spectrum from 0, which is deterministic, to 2, which is a bit crazy. And whatever is your own opportunity for AI, you can probably find yourself on that spectrum. Do we want more factual responses, or do we want it to be more creative and have more freedom to create those completions? Okay. I'm going to stop with this live presentation now and jump back to the PowerPoint, where I want us to answer this question next. How can we be part of the AI future, where by we, I mean the Dynamics partners? But before we answer this, let's do first a quick recap of what have we heard today. We talked about that AI models are not just language models, that there's multiple models involved, and quite often they're connected together to create the AI experience. We talked about how do you train a model, how do you fine-tune a model, when should you do that, and when should you opt out for a pre-trained model. We talked about where you can find them, and then we looked into what does it mean to be a prompt engineer, what does grounding mean, and what do hallucinations do. Now, this next part is going to be more of my own perspective of how do I see Dynamics partners fitting into this AI future. Because I have worked for a partner which had a machine learning division long before ChatGPT was a thing. And I've also worked for a partner that realistically will never do anything with AI because they're just too small. So I kind of see it in 3 different ways. Either you're big enough, you have the dedicated teams, you might already have the people with data science skills, you have enterprise customers, you have vertical solutions, you have the data. In that case, go for it. Find the insights in big data. But realistically, I don't think that any one of you who is big enough needed to hear me say that they should go for AI. You probably already have dedicated teams working on that. The more interesting question is, what about for those of us who don't have the budgets, who don't have the timelines, who don't have the teams? What can we do? Well, in that case, I would say, let's look into the pre-trained models. Let's look into Azure OpenAI. The good thing about Azure OpenAI for me is that suddenly you no longer need data scientists to create a feature with AI. You just need your developers who know how to send and receive API calls, and with some additional training into prompt engineering, they can start creating new features and empower your solutions with AI. And this can actually even have a much better return on investment compared to traditional AI, because on the one hand, you have your dedicated team of data scientists, which are going to be training a new model for the next 3 years, at which point it might be already obsolete. Or on the other, you can have a couple of developers create a new feature in 3 months, and your users can start having the benefits of text generation, text summarization, and all the other things that pre-trained models are good at. But then What if we don't have our own solutions? Or if we do have our own solutions, but the problems really aren't a good fit for language models? What then? Does it mean we cannot be part of the AI future? Well, of course not. For those of us, we can simply adopt AI tools everybody else is going to build. Microsoft is not going to stop creating Copilots. They're going to be releasing Copilots probably for the next, I don't know how many months. At Directions, I've heard that at this point, there's already more than 150 Copilots out there. And what we have to do is just keep an open mind for all of the new AI tools that are going to come and try to use them, see if they work for us or not. I would say don't take Microsoft's word for it and just use every Copilot available, and don't even take my word for it. If you would ask me, is Copilot in Viva Sales good? I have no idea. I've never used Viva Sales, and I've never been in a sales position. On the other hand, if you ask me about GitHub Copilot, I'll talk your ear off about how much I love it. Because when it was released, I spent a week working with GitHub Copilot, and immediately I could see how this makes me more productive, how this makes me better. And I'll do the same thing with all the other Copilots and all the other AI tools. Right now, I'm working a lot with Microsoft PowerPoint to create all the presentations like this. And I'm quite excited about what Microsoft is going to bring with that Copilot. But how I'm going to approach that is, if I get my hands on it, I'll test it out. I'll see, does it make me better? Does it make me more productive? And if it does, I'll try to continue using it. And I would invite all of you to take the same approach. Now, finally, I want to pass a few key takeaways to you so that you take away with you when you click that end call button. First, we need to remember that AI comes in many flavors. Even though ChatGPT is right now the biggest thing, that's not the only thing AI is. AI and machine learning are high effort investments. We need the data, we need the teams, but that's not necessarily the only way to go, because generative AI models are becoming better and better with each iteration. But at the same time, we need to remember that they're not all powerful. Don't throw problems that are not well suited for generative AI at generative AI. Also, don't be too trusting. Don't be too trusting of the features that you will build, and also don't be too trusting of the Copilots that Microsoft will create. They are Copilots for a reason, and don't let yourself be caught using them on autopilot. Next, being a builder is not the only way to participate in the AI future. Sure, it's one way, but you can also just be open to new AI tools that are coming, which are going to empower your organizations to be more productive. And finally, it's not about cost savings. The Copilots are not here to replace our jobs. They're here to make us more productive. It's about productivity increase. Now, finally, I would just like to take a quick minute to share with you the AIM initiative that was recently announced from Microsoft. How do I connect AIM? Well, maybe first, what is AIM? AIM is an initiative that can help you, partners, move your customers from on-prem to the cloud. And why do I think it kind of relates with the AI topic we just went through? Is because Microsoft will continue to release new Copilots and new AI features, but to make the best use of them, we have to be in the cloud. And with AIM, which stands for Activate, Innovate, and Move, I would kind of describe this initiative as Microsoft will give you incentives for you to move your customer base to the cloud. And we at Campanule, as an AIM modernization center, we can help you with steps along that way. From the very beginning with upgrade assessments, where we can help you figure out how difficult is a customer to move to the cloud, all the way to the other side with actual execution and then maintenance of those customers once they're in the cloud. But there's also this middle part, the innovate part. where it says infusing AI into solutions. Now, if you are a Dynamics partner that has their own solutions and you're thinking, how could I include AI into my solution? I would invite you to reach out to us, because I mentioned earlier that we already went through this with a couple of partners, and we can help you either with assessment, just figuring out, do you have a good opportunity for AI or do you maybe not? Or we can also help you with development, because we already went through a couple of cycles of prompt engineering and have an idea of what kind of prompts work well, what kind of prompts don't really work too well. So if you do have your own solution and you would like to figure out how you can include AI with it, well, reach out to Companion and we'll see how we can help you along with it. And now finally, I'd like to thank all of you for being here today with me. If you have any questions, you can either drop them right now in the message box, or on the other hand, you can also find me on Twitter, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can connect with me there, send me your questions there, and we can continue these discussions online. But otherwise, that's all from my side, and thank you.